Remember to like and share the video. Your opinions in the comments section and sign up to receive updates about our recent tales that I will always remember. Everything changed that night, especially because it began in the most commonplace. It was a crisp fall day, as far as possible. Dusk as the leaves softly whirled about the driveway. As soon as I emerged onto Ryan, the porch husband, was shutting his keys jingled behind us at the front entrance. We were gently making our way to a dinner party at Richard Hamilton's house, his boss. It was a warm, informal invitation, something Richard did every year too, celebrating the success of their business. Brian told me it was a laid-back occasion, but this time, something felt different. Are you certain this clothing isn't excessive? Nervously, I smoothed the silky, my navy blue dress's fabric embraced just enough of my body to give me confidence, but still refined and humble. Brian slipped his arm while grinning reassuringly around my waist. Emma, you look stunning. Ideal for the event. The drive to Richard's home was nearly silent. Meditative streetlights illuminated with golden halos against the sky's fading darkness, and I couldn't get rid of the sensation that Brian, I have butterflies in my stomach, had just received a promotion, and tonight seemed to be more than a simple dinner, intended to leave a lasting impression on Richards. The house was spectacular, with a large, bright lights streaming from the front lawn. Huge windows. When we walked in, Richard personally welcomed us and gave us a warm, giving Brian a henna shake and turning his eyes that are genuinely appreciative of me. Emma, it's great to meet you at last. Richard was tall and said, you, with warmth, assured and elegantly attired with a warm smile and silver street hair. Brian always says such nice things about you. I said, thank you, as I felt my cheeks blush a little. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. Soft music and laughing inside produced a calm environment. Richard had. His house was designed with exquisite taste. Tastefully, yet it felt really softly inviting. Candles flickered on tables laden with mouth-watering appetizers, sparkling glasses and fresh flowers. As the evening went on, Richard's presence appeared captivating, and he did it with ease. Sincerely engaged everyone in his vicinity. Several times, I was attractive and attentive. Saw his gaze stay on me for a moment, not in an improper manner, but just out of curiosity. Maybe I was dreaming, but something. His look evoked a feeling of. I was looking forward to dinner. Brian was in the middle of a chat with a few co-workers throughout the living room, and I entered the silent terrace to enjoy the garden's fresh air. Was illuminated by moonlight and scented with fall foliage blending with blossoming. I didn't realize that Jasmine was deep in thought. Richard going out in silence until behind me, he said softly, it's quiet. I was taken aback. Isn't it out here? His eyes were meeting his serene stare, softly displaying a warmth that warmed my instant relaxation. Certainly, I gave a small smile. You lean a little against the railing. Thank you, you have a lovely home, said earnestly, taking a step forward. But, Emma, you're still keeping your place polite. If it's okay with you, I may state that you appear like someone who has a greater appreciation. Talks that go beyond small talk. I laughed, taken aback by his wisdom. Gently nodding, I guess that's accurate. Richard took a moment to reflect before continuing, may I ask you a question? Naturally, I replied, and my interest was piqued. You and Brian appeared sincere in your happiness. started to cautiously glance for a moment toward. How do you feel about the lit house? Keep up that kind of relationship after. I was surprised by his query after all these years. Guard, not because to the fact that it was invasive, but due to the fact that it was surprisingly personal. Sincere and courteous, there was sensitivity underneath his self-assured. I paused for a second outside, then. To be honest, it hasn't always been simple, Richard, but we've discovered how. Talk freely, pay close attention, and continue learning new details about each. I believe it's about letting. He seemed to want us to grow together. Very touched by what I said, nodding thoughtfully. That's really uncommon. Between us, the moment lingered softly. Then, with a slight expression, Richard felt embarrassed as he looked down. Chuckling quietly, I apologize. Maybe that was too intimate, and I didn't. Swiftly reassured that it's actually. Most individuals would rather stay on after refreshing. Richard's smile reappeared on the surface, gently, and he inhaled deeply as, despite having guts, theirs. I would like to propose that he started. Carefully, but please be aware that it's fully truthful and courteous. If it makes you uneasy in any kind, simply say the word, and we won't talk about it again. His seriousness shocked me once more, and my heart raced, and I felt anxious and fascinated by the genuineness in his. Hey, what is it? I asked in a nearly silent manner. He looked back toward me while I held my breath. The house again to confirm that we were. By myself, I've observed how Brian's self-assurance and contentment at work have blossomed since your union strengthened. You're obviously an remarkable woman who genuinely. I'd appreciate your understanding of relationships, assistance with a personal matter. Bewildered but incredibly inquisitive, I sought assistance. What precisely did Richard hesitate with? Carefully selecting his words, I've found it difficult to open myself for a long time. He acknowledged that he needed to connect emotionally. Voice with a hint of vulnerability. Relationships are typically shallow. Despite my desire for authenticity and depth, I see someone who could assist me in you. Recognize the significance of building that type of emotional bond with his desire. Startled me a lot with my first shock. Melted instantly when I recognized his. He wasn't requesting anything in all earnest. He was contacting someone in an inappropriate way, sincerely, for emotional support. The request's intimacy left me. I'm immediately stunned to learn that this is uncommon, he added, subtly detecting my. I don't want you to feel hesitant, under pressure, but I greatly admire your Emma, and I believe you may be precisely the individual who would assist me in doing. A flood of feelings swept through me. Being honest was demoralizing and beneath my. My first reaction was one of sincere sympathy. I never expected this kind of thing. However, I couldn't deny the sincerity in his eyes, and I couldn't ignore the expanding. I was intrigued by his request. Taking a deep breath, I eventually answered my. Richard, your voice is steady but quiet. Sincerity is very important, therefore let's chat. Later, in private, I would like to hear more about your feelings and perhaps I can provide him with some relief. Was evident, and his smile reappeared. Kind, grateful, and brimming with, thank you very much, Emma. We really stood there, in the moonlight, the delicate. Our stress turned into mutual respect as well as a fresh, surprising emotional bond. I pondered why it was still evening, clutched with a mixture of anxious anticipation and and a subdued sense of purpose didn't. I am aware of how profound this discussion is. Would alter everything following hour. I overheard a talk on the patio. I found myself returning to the party, my mind racing with a mix of astonishment and awe. And curiosity. Brian remained captivated. He laughed enthusiastically throughout his chat about. He looked up to see a co-worker's narrative. When he saw me everything, he smiled pleasantly. Okay, he said softly, setting his. Naturally, I put my hand on the small of my back. Richard and I gently reassured him. Had a fascinating conversation at Brian's eyebrows raised a bit, and I squeezed. His hand was reassuringly gentle. Smile, there's nothing to be concerned about. Something he wanted to communicate on a personal level. Brian nodded. I'll tell you later. Honestly, it was one of the attributes what I loved most about him was his sincere trust. With regard for my independence, they requested. The celebration steadily dwindled in number of guests. Drifted off to say good night to. I was drawn to Richard's happy farewells. Once more nodding from the other side of the room. In a subtle way, we hadn't spoken much. Because of the patio, but the momentary silence. A quick look told us both a lot. Our discussion was not yet complete. Richard, when we were about to depart, came up to us again with a look on his face. He put a warm hand resting on Brian's shoulder, warmly grinning at Brian. Thank you. You're fortunate to have both joining tonight. Be accompanied by someone like Emma. Brian slipped his arm and smiled proudly. Around my waist, so trust me, I'm aware of. Richard hesitated a little before turning to face me. Before I talk to Emma, may I simply take a minute before you depart? There's something I want to talk about. Naturally, I responded calmly and immediately, even if my heartbeat accelerated once more. Brian graciously asked to wait. Richard, the door is providing us some privacy. Led me softly to a peaceful nook. His voice, far from the lingering guests, was gentle. Considerate, Emma. I didn't mean to put you in a position sooner if I made you're uncomfortable, and I sincerely apologize. Informed him right away that it was simply caught me off guard, but in a positive manner. It was wonderful to be candid, he said, clearly relieved. I'm happy to hear that. That I hesitated and inquired in a low voice. Why me, Richard? He obviously hesitated. Carefully choose his remarks because something about you is unique. Genuineness of your generosity, which I've rarely found you to be quite grounded. And I've always looked up to that from a distance. He grinned softly, his eyes full of genuineness, and observing how profoundly you've had an impact on Brian's life, I discovered. Maybe you could explain it to me better myself, and I'd like to learn how to establish deep ties that I don't wish to continue residing behind walls. The words deeply resonated with me, reminding me of my personal experience. Recalled how difficult it had been for me to speak candidly with Brian out of fear of vulnerability, which had required years of development, perseverance, and bravery to succeed. I know what the familiarity we now shared. It's as though I quietly acknowledged that I used to dread of emotional honesty as well. It's like diving into the unknown, but Richard's expression says it's always worth it. Enhanced appreciation and susceptibility mixing in his eyes. That's just what it is. I wish I had the bravery you have. Rest certain, you're demonstrating it correctly. For a brief period, there was silence between us, laden with comprehension. At last, Richard spoke briefly again. reluctantly. Hey, if you're game, I'd like to talk again, maybe elsewhere. Less formal and more laid back. I would want your viewpoint and your candid observations. I pledge complete discretion and respect. The intensity of it made my heart skip a beat. His plea was respectful and earnest, and very captivating. I stopped, carefully considering my answer. Ultimately, kindness prevailed over whatever. With a lingering doubt, I responded gently, let's schedule a time soon. Truly wish to assist Richard in a noticeable way. Calm, a soft smile creeping over his expression, thank you, is unimaginable. How much it means that I smiled back at him. I feel a flowering of warmth in my chest as we agreed to share a common understanding. Silent acknowledgement of trust between the. Brian looked over suspiciously on the way home, shattering the cozy quiet, so he started with a playful grin, asking whether you were going to tell me more, or should I make a guess? What transpired tonight? I laughed softly, stretched out and took his hand, selecting. As usual, Richard was honest and opened up about experiencing emotional isolation, stated in a subtle manner that he wants to know how to establish a meaningful connection, but he's having trouble. Arrive by yourself. Brian listened. I can squeeze my hand out thoughtfully, see his constant guardedness, particularly regarding private matters, but why? Perhaps because I'm outside, come to you. Honestly, I offered his typical world. Opening up to someone may be simpler, who does not personally participate in his daily life. Brian smiled softly and nodded slowly. He made a smart decision during the days that silently slipped through Richard's. Words were stuck in my head all the time. Was not until almost a week later, precisely as twilight descended, I was given. Richard sent me a message. Would you meet up? Riverside Park tomorrow night, just take a stroll, maybe about 7 p.m. My pulse accelerated awareness of the importance of. Without hesitation, I took the next move, responded in the affirmative, and the following night I arrived early. The park by the river was calm, an elegantly arching canopy of trees. Their leaves are above the walkway, softly murmuring in the chilly fall wind, the lampposts' illumination, the shimmering reflections on the way, gently on the placid surface of the river. Richard showed there a few seconds later with his informal dress that highlights a. I hadn't seen his fragility before. Warmly welcomed me, with relief visible in his. He started by saying, "Thank you for coming." Lowering myself gently into a step next to me. Recognize that I was concerned you could change. I wouldn't, I gently soothed your mind. Grinning up at him, like I had promised assistance, and I truly meant it. We walked together, beneath the starlight by the riverbed, just starting to show up in the growing. Our talk flowed at twilight, naturally, eventually going beyond casual conversations, leading to more profound inner truths. Richard gave tidbits about his history, struggled to strike a balance between career success and openly expressing his emotions and his concerns regarding his inability to fully understand intimacy. Sincerity profoundly affected me in return. Shared some of my personal journeys, Brian's weaknesses and victories, and what it meant to establish a genuine connection on an emotional level. Every revelation appeared to close the distance between us and cultivate reciprocal confidence and sincere regard. By the time we stopped at a bench with a view of crickets' soft hum and the river, accompanied with the gentle sound of leaves rustling, Richard cast a contemplative glance across the moonlight softly reflected in his water eyes. He murmured almost in a whisper. Whispers, I'm having trouble recalling the last. For the first time I felt this at ease, just speaking to someone. I gave them a gentle grin, being profoundly moved by his candor. Talking is simple when you feel secure. That is the initial step in establishing a connection. Richard turned to face me with genuineness, glowing in his eyes. Many thanks for demonstrating to me that I am unable to tell. As we sat there, I told you how much tonight means. Silently, the stress I'd first felt totally transformed into a pleasant one. Friendship. It was evident that tonight was only the start of something profoundly significant and not a danger to my marriage, but instead an investigation of mutual regard, emotional development, and the unexpected relationships in life occasionally offers. But I had no idea how deeply this friendship would shortly affect everyone's life over the weeks that, after our encounter at Riverside Park, gave unexpected clarity to my companionship with Richard. Each talk strengthened the relationship of trust. We had proven that Richard had developed much more at ease disclosing his feelings, posing meaningful queries regarding links of communication and intimacy. Brian gave us his whole support. Newly formed friendship that comprehends my. The objective was pure sincerity and sincere, but underneath the surface an unexpected anxiety gradually surfaced, one that neither I nor Richard publicly recognized, but it was evident to both of us that talks had progressively turned toward longer, more intimate, and occasionally lasted well into the evenings. Our shared emotional bond was unquestionable but well preserved. One evening, within polite bounds, as the first frost of winter covered the Brian said that rooftops he would have to depart the city for a 2-day business trip. I'll return home on Thursday night after my excursion out. He kissed my forehead tenderly. He packed lightly, saying, I swear you'll be okay without me. I chuckled quietly, shoving his shoulder in a sportive manner of course, I'm only here for 2 nights. Totally capable, he said, his eyes laughing, warmly sparkling. I know you are. Just say you'll give a call if necessary. Anything. I would swear, I muttered, experiencing a brief flutter of loneliness while I observed him abandoning on Brian's trip's second night. Just my phone buzzed after dusk, and it was, Are you free tonight, Richard? There's something I would really like to discuss personally at dinner. Sometimes with reluctance, lingered in my chest for a moment, but curiosity swiftly triumphed over prudence. Yes, I'm free. What time? Was the response. Inside. Richard recommended a peaceful moment for the minutes. Private eatery in the outskirts of town. Sufficient to converse freely but comfortably. We decided to meet at 7 o'clock, according to the public. Richard was already there when I got there at p.m. Seated with a contemplative yet slightly uneasy, the dimly lighted eatery was cozy and welcoming, embellished in rich earth tones that seemed personal and, You look lovely, Emma. Reassuring. Richard gave me a cordial greeting as I walked up. I said, Thank you, in his soft voice, gently noticing a tiny flutter in my. I knew this night was different because of my tummy. From our earlier dinner discussions, went through the conversation with ease. Richard was initially cautious, appeared preoccupied, as though gathering bravery for a significant endeavor. Richard, are you okay? I asked at last, Seeing his tense spot, he gave a feeble smile, clearly running a hand through his hair. I have to say something, and I'm nervous.